So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York. Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we film at the Cablevision Studios in Hop Hog, New York. My guest today, to my left, is Linda Argila and her daughter, Ashley. Linda served over a year, or just over a year, in prison for harboring a fugitive, the father of her beautiful daughter, Ashley here. Talk about making lemonade out of lemons. Linda has certainly done that, and I guess you could say she's a success story for coming out of prison, but she's become an advocate for women impacted by incarceration, and really the epidemic that we have in the United States overall of imprisoning people, but her issue is especially the imprisoning of women, and specifically mothers. So let me start with you, Linda. First of all, thank you for coming. I know this is something difficult to talk about. I mean, it's years ago that it happened, but I know it's still a difficult thing to talk about. And for you, Ashley, for having the courage to come and talk about it, the situation that happened here. Let's start at the beginning. So, how did you become? Tell me about your story and how you even got involved in the legal system.
Well, it all started 25 years ago. I met a man, fell in love.
You were living where?
On Long Island,
okay.
In Oyster Bay.
Okay.
And I got pregnant with Ashley.
Okay.
And
where was the man from?
So we met on a blind date. He was originally from California.
Okay.
And then,
so a friend set you up that knew him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Ends up being a great friend, I guess. Okay.
But, on the surface, he was a successful businessman, very nice, outgoing. And for me, I was I had a business on Long Island, very successful, came from a very nice family, and he swept me off my feet. So for me, I, fell in love. I got pregnant,
and you weren't unhappy that you got pregnant because you loved the man.
Yes. Well, I got pregnant, and we were going to be married after I had the baby.
Right.
And 6 months into my pregnancy, I found out that he was wanted for marijuana trafficking.
How did you find that out?
One morning, very early in the morning, there was an FBI raid at the house, and about 20 FBI agents barged in with guns drawn looking for him, and that is when my world started.
You had no idea.
Started to fall apart.
At that point, you had no idea.
I did not.
And what happened? Was he there?
Well, he was there, but when they asked me if I knew where he was, at that moment, the first thing I could think of was that I didn't know where he was.
Right.
And I actually...
which is a normal reaction, I would think, to protect the person that you love. And
yeah.
Were you pregnant at the time, or did you have Ashley?
I was 6 months pregnant at the time, and I really thought they were going to find him. I figured, he was next to me, not long before they busted down the doors. Right. How is it possible they weren't going to find him?
Did they tell you what they were there for right away? What they were looking for?
Not right away, no. So he ran, and I was absorbing it all, taking it all in. Keep in mind, I was in shock. I was 6 months pregnant, and I figured that was it. They would find him, but as it turns out, they didn't find him. So
where did he go?
He was hiding
in the house.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So at that point, again, my life. I'm in shock, and eventually he goes away, he leaves, and I give birth to Ashley. Ultimately, I was charged 10 years after that incident with harboring a fugitive, because that morning when they came looking for him, I said he wasn't there.
Right.
So that was what that I was eventually charged with, the harboring.
Now in that 10-year period, you with him, Ashley was born, was he part of her life at that point, for those 10 years?
He wasn't a part of her life. After I gave birth to Ashley, I did see him, but for most of Ashley's life, he wasn't a part of it. No.
Okay, so now they come back and they charge you 10 years later with harboring a fugitive?
Well, over that decade period, and of course, they charged me because for some reason the government felt that I had something to do with their inability to find him. And 10 years later, when they still hadn't found him, they wanted to close the case, and I guess, they figured, they didn't know what to do with me, to be very honest.
Right.
I stood before the judge at least, I'd say 9 times. My life pretty much unraveled over those 10 years. I really, it was debilitating because I was arrested in '94, I was indicted in 1996, and I wasn't sentenced to a year and a day in prison until 1999.
Right.
And by that point, my daughter was 9 years old.
Right.
And Ashley had no idea what I was going through.
Did you think you were ever going to go to jail during this time? I mean, I know it's looming over you, but in your back of your mind, are you thinking, they're never going to put me in jail? I really had nothing. I'm not a drug trafficker.
Right.
I'm never going to go to jail. Were you thinking this, or did you think you were going to go to jail at some point?
I never imagined in my wildest dreams that I was going to be sentenced to prison.
Okay.
And
so you never discussed that with Ashley?
Oh, Ashley had no idea about what I was going through. She never knew about her father.
So Ashley, what did you think about this whole time that was going on, this 10-year period? Your father's not there. I mean, what did you think was going on?
I had no idea everything that my mother was going through. Luckily at the time, my grandparents were very supportive. But my mom did a really great job at raising me and trying to keep me happy for most of the time.
Right.
But, the day that I found out when I was 9 years old, I was crushed. I had no idea what was going on, even back then.
So what happened? Your mom has to sit you down one day and say, there's something we have to talk about?
Yes.
And that had to be a traumatic experience.
It was very
the whole
traumatic.
World sort of, you probably, what in your mind is your reality, and then you come to find out that it's really not your reality. And did she tell you that there's a possibility that she was going to go to prison?
Yes. She said that she had to go away for about a little over a year, possibly, and that I'd be staying with my grandparents in our apartment. And I was very confused. I had no idea what was going on. I actually remember it like it was yesterday, and I couldn't really grasp the idea of what prison was. There wasn't internet like the kids have today to look things up. I was just very confused, and I think over time I just, started to understand it, but at the same time I wasn't.
And you also know your mom as a loving mother, not as a criminal.
Yes.
So, I think you're probably thinking in your head only criminals go to jail. So now, did you have a jury trial?
No, I never had a trial. I never had really any restrictions at all. I basically cooperated with the government at that point. I didn't really know anything. But when they eventually came to me in '94, I told them what I knew, which was very little, and they understood that. So they really knew that I had nothing to do with any of her father's criminal behavior at the point. They knew I had just met him, and got pregnant shortly after I had met him. And so at the end of the day, it was a shocker that through all of that, I would be charged with something like harboring a fugitive. And as a mother who was never in trouble, came from a great family, I worked very, very hard. I couldn't imagine. It's just when I started to realize what the system was like, the justice system, as a mother, that I would be ripped apart from my daughter, who already didn't have a father.
Right. So did you plea bargain? Is that how you came? If you didn't have a jury trial, or was there a plea bargain deal that?
You know, to be very honest with you, Gary, there were so many things that went on. I really didn't understand what was going on. And I had a lawyer, but I was a free woman, so it never occurred to me to really research or that I was going to go to prison. So I didn't really think that I should be worried about anything. So there was never a plea bargain because basically, I think when I originally told them the story that I knew he was in the house when they came looking for him was ultimately what I was charged for.
Right.
And again, you know, they felt, in my mind, I believe now, today, when I can look back and reflect on it, that they felt that I had something to do with their inability to find him.
So they were pissed off.
They were pissed off.
That you didn't do it. Okay, so now we'll just step forward a little bit. So now you end up, you get sentenced to a year and a day in prison. You've never been in prison in your life, and you know your parents, I'm sure, and your daughter. Everybody's devastated. What's that like? The day they tell you this is it? I mean, I guess you turn yourself in that day because they know who you are.
Actually, I had been before the judge so many times that for sentencing. And I went before the judge, and then they didn't know what to do, so I left. And this just went on forever, and as per my lawyer, he felt that it was the best thing that could go on. Really, though, that decade of me going through this interrogation,
you were in prison to some extent.
My life was continuously unraveling. I could not keep up with it all because it was very hard for me to maintain a business, to provide for my daughter as a single mother. I was falling apart. By the final time when I went before the judge and they finally sentenced me to a year and a day, I was in some sort of traumatized state and shocked.
Traumatic stress disorder.
In fact, that day I went by myself to the courthouse because I had been there so many times.
And nothing happened.
And I almost could cry telling this story. And, you know, my parents weren't there, nobody was there for me, and I was sentenced. So, of course, that was, you know, a moment in my life that seems like it just happened yesterday.
And did they take you out right there in handcuffs?
No, I had 2 months to self-surrender. The prison that I didn't know at the time anything at all other than in 2 months I would find out where I was going. So from that point on, that's when I realized that I should get a lawyer to maybe go through appeals. You know, Gary, my main focus at that point was my daughter.
Right, of course. What's going to
Because
happen?
all I could think about is that I have to tell this little girl, I'm her lifeline.
Now, Ashley was how old at the time? 10?
She was only 9 years old.
Okay.
Had happy, little, beautiful girl. And somehow I had to find the courage to tell her that I was leaving her.
Right.
And to try to put a plan together to be able to, you know, take care of her.
No, Ashley, I'm sure you remember that day. I'm
Yes.
sure. I mean, how'd that day go when Mom came home and?
My mind was racing. I had no idea what was going on. I remember her pulling me aside and saying that she had to speak with me, and my grandparents were there, and she pulled me in her bedroom and sat me down and started telling me that she had to leave, and it was going to be a while that I wouldn't be able to be with her. And I remember asking her if I could go, you know, was it something I did? Why couldn't I be with her? And I was really upset. I didn't really understand it. And then over the next few weeks and the next few months, you know, when she wasn't there and I was crying or missing her, you know, it was really hard, you know, not understanding it at such a young age and wondering where my mother is.
How do you explain to your friends, you know, where's Mom? I mean, that's
exactly.
You know, and that's got to be a hard thing it's hard for you to tell her, but then you have to now face your friends
Yes.
and explain, you know,
Well,
why Mom's in jail.
Yes.
Actually, Gary, we had a little bit of a plan, and I felt with the stigma of her having a mother going to prison, it was better not to tell anyone.
Okay.
Which was a pretty heavy burden for a 9-year-old.
Of course, yeah.
Basically, you know, little tales of, you know, where I was and how to keep it together for that year.
Right.
I don't believe that if I had any longer than a year that I would have been able to hold it all together. It was a miracle for us. And, so the plan was in motion. I left self-surrender. Actually, Ashley came with my mom and dad to drop me off in prison.
And where did you go?
Danbury, Connecticut,
Okay.
which is the infamous Orange is the New Black,
Right.
same facility. And, that first day for me,
It had to be horrific.
it was horrific, yes. And
Not knowing what to expect, and
it
leaving
was...
your daughter. I mean, it's, I can't imagine the trauma. The trauma.
There's no words to really express what that was like. And I found that for so many years, I started to write a book about 3 years ago. And in doing that, it just opened up so many memories that I really had buried for so long.
Right.
And that trauma of my first day leaving Ashley. And, so many people ask, what was it like going to prison? And you can only imagine. I mean, and believe me, there are...
is this a country club like they talk about?
No. And what I do is I challenge anyone. I say, do one day. And,
You'll know it's not a country club.
the thing is what I try to say as a mother, which is why I do the work I do, why we do the work we do for an organization here in New York called Our Children, H-O-U-R Children, is because the system is not really set up for women, and more women are going to prison.
Well, more and more people are going to
more
prison.
and more people, but the numbers are rising with the.
I think our culture has become where it's so accepted. We're so used to sending everybody to prison. Why not send the women to prison too? We send everybody.
Well, so I focus on the children, and when people say, how was it going to prison? I mean, at the end of the day, today actually, there's 2.7 million children that are victims of parental incarceration in the United States.
Wow.
And so no matter how...
And you were lucky because you had parents
Yes.
that she could go. I don't even know what would happen if your parents had, let's say they were deceased. What would happen?
Oh, well, Ashley would have ended up in foster care.
Unbelievable.
And
And
that's
did the
what-
judge ask? I'm just curious. When the judge is thinking about sentencing you, does he say to you, Miss Argila, what I'm going to sentence you? What's going to happen with your daughter? I'm concerned. Is there any concern, or is just
No.
that's it? We don't care what's going to happen to her.
No, there was zero concern about my daughter, I really felt when I look back now that it didn't matter. It was, already determined. There was no consideration for Ashley and what would happen to her, and which is what happens to so many mothers and children. However, the one thing, and you asked, was it like a country club? Putting all of that aside and what you go through before you actually end up in prison, during prison, and then the coming home, which is even sometimes harder because you have lost everything. You have lost family a lot of times. There may be some separation with your children.
Right, bonding, and
The bonding.
you're missing things.
And then if you tack on, you're a felon at that point.
Right. The rest
And
of your life, you're a felon.
So it becomes even more difficult when you get home.
Right.
But I think the worst part about it as a mother is to witness, to watch your child suffer.
Right.
I watched her life shatter, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it.
I want to move
Yes.
forward to your advocacy group, to your advocacy. Now you get out, and what makes you and Ashley different? I mean, you're both sitting here, and you're articulate. It's difficult to get out in front of thousands of people going to watch the show, and it's not an easy thing to do. You could, like as you did when you went to prison, you just said we're going to hide this from everybody and not have to deal with it. But now you've said, hey, we're going out there and we're talking about it. How did you become that person, not the person who just fell into depression and maybe suicide and ended up on welfare? What made you different? What did you do? Because a lot of people get out of prison and it goes very badly for them because nobody wants to hire somebody who was a felon. Relationships probably suck because you're going to go home and say, hey, I met this beautiful woman, yeah, but she spent a year in jail and she's a convicted prison. And you're starting, when you're dating and you have to go to people and they're going to find out now with Facebook, and the internet, somebody's going to Google your name and they're going to find out especially now because you talk about it, that your mom was in prison. There's a stigma attached to that. So how do you both end up being, healthy people and productive members of society? What made you guys different?
Well, I think that we're a very rare mother and daughter team. There's not many mothers and children that advocate the way we do together.
But do you think that helped your healing, that you advocate and didn't just say, well, let's just forget about this stage of our lives?
Yes. I mean, for me, when I was in prison, it happened, I remember the day I had lost my appeal, and I knew at that moment that I was definitely not getting home to Ashley. And, I sort of hit rock bottom. And, even though I was depressed, even though my life had completely fallen apart, the only thing that kept me going was that I knew Ashley was waiting for me. And so from that moment on, I realized that I had to pull it together for my daughter.
So you did this while you were in prison? I mean, you had a lot of time to think. You were thinking in prison, hey, when I get out, I'm going to pull it together and I'm going to make the best of it. You thought about this in prison?
I didn't know what, Gary, but I knew that when I got home, the only way I was going to survive is if I made prison have a purpose.
But you weren't angry? I mean, you weren't.
No,
sitting there
actually.
how could they do this to me? How could they do this to my daughter?
No, I was never. For some reason, I was never angry.
Were you angry, Ashley? Were you angry at the government, the police, your father? Were you angry?
Not at the time, because I was just so young. I didn't really understand it. But as I got older, when I was in my teens, I would get frustrated, and I think it only allows me now, through the work that we do, to really understand what people are going through and just help them every day.
So what is it that you do? Because we don't have too much time left.
Okay.
But tell me, what is it that you do? And you mentioned the statistics are alarming, and I feel the way I feel when we spoke is
Yes.
Why do we have to put you in prison? I mean, were you a danger to society? Okay, you did something wrong. We didn't get to the whole story, but listen, you did something wrong. What should be? Did you need to go to prison? They could have put an ankle bracelet on you and said, "Hey, you have house arrest for 6 months. You have to take your daughter to school. Take her to, be a mother to her." Did you have to go to prison? I mean, it sounds ridiculous.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, more and more, the U.S. incarcerates more people than any other civilized country in the world.
And uncivilized, we do more than uncivilized nations.
Many are women. Most women are nonviolent offenders. They are primary caretakers of their children under 18 years old. So getting to the work that we do, and because of our own personal experience, I found that we are able to tell our story and raise awareness for women and children impacted by incarceration.
So are you trying to stop the incarceration, or are you trying to help the people? I mean, you can't do everything. What is your goal? To help the people who have been released?
Well, in some sense, yes. When you help the children, you break the intergenerational incarceration. When you offer women that are coming home from prison, formerly incarcerated, tools and ways to provide and take care of their children, in education, or tools that they never had before. Many of these women are coming from broken families. They've been in foster care themselves. They never had an opportunity to take care of themselves, to provide for themselves, and they've made poor choices. It's all about poor choices. They go away, they serve their time, they want an opportunity, they want to get better, and there's nothing for them. The system doesn't provide a means for when they're coming home. Many of these women don't even have a place to go when they come home. They've already lost connections with their children. Their children may be in foster care. They didn't have parents like I did, and grandparents like my daughter did to take care of them.
And they had the financial needs, because obviously you were financially devastated. So if you didn't have a family that had the means, you would be homeless when you got out of prison.
We would have been on the streets, correct.
Right. So you got lucky that you had this. So what do we need to do to change it?
Well, we do what we can. The organization that we work with is called Our Children.
HOUR.
HOUR.
Children.org, not .com, because I kept it in the wrong one.
Our Children, HOUR Children.org. They're a Queens-based organization They are a nonprofit serving women and children for over 30 years. And I have seen the miracles that they perform.
As far as breaking the intergenerational, stopping the children of the children. I mean, because the statistics are alarming. If the mother goes to, well, the father too, but if one of the parents goes to prison, the number is just huge.
Well,
that the child will go to prison.
We're an example. That's not always the case. Yes, so just providing programs, transformational services to these women and their children, keeping children united with their moms, being over the course of their incarceration. And so what I do is I host events and I do fundraising for the organization. And we have some pretty amazing upcoming events right now.
Which everybody can see on that website.
I will. Yes.
So they can go to the website. What about you're on Facebook?
We're on Facebook.
Okay.
They can go to the website to find out about all of the ways that people can get involved and learn more about this epidemic.
Really. Now, let me ask, because you were impacted in a different way, but certainly it was a life-changing experience. And if you could tell a judge now who's in a courtroom thinking about sentencing a mother who's got children, what would you tell that judge? Because judges do watch our show. What would you tell the judge as a person whose mother was put in jail? What would you tell them when they're thinking about whether they should incarcerate or something else?
Well, as my mother was saying, that when it came down to her sentencing, the judge didn't think about any of the things that were going to affect her life, as in her children, collateral damage, the family, and so many of these women that aren't in there for high violent crimes, and it breaks apart their families. Even the stigma that their children have to be, when they're grown up in school, everyone knows, and how they're treated, it just all makes a difference. And I think that we need to keep in mind that just because people make mistakes doesn't make them horrible people.
Great. Thanks so much for coming and telling your story. I know this is the beginning. You've been doing this for a long time, but getting out in public and writing your book in the privacy of your home is different than getting out on the camera. I know it's difficult for the two of you, and now it opens up a can of worms, and everyone's going to ask you more questions because we talked about a 15-year history in 29 minutes. So there's a lot more, and they can get more information. But what you're doing is really great. I think it's healthy for the two of you, which is why you two have become a team together, and you're helping fix the world, really. And hopefully the judges watching this will think twice, when they put, whether it's a father who's got children, is the caregiver, the mother, about putting anybody in prison. It's not just a person. You put them in prison, that's the end of it. This is living. You're living with this your whole life. You're living with this the rest of your life too. That, and this seems like there could have been other options out there. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much.
I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us on Long Island Backstory.
I think every single person who receives a red light camera ticket should fight their ticket. Why? Because it's nothing but a cash grab and a cash cow.
We've all been told that it's all about safety and there's no quotas. You prove that it's got nothing to do with safety and it is quotas.
Red light cameras are nothing more than a tax, plain and simple. Don't anybody ever tell you any different.
The red light cameras are a fraud.